You might be like, oh my gosh, who is Martha with? Oh man, are you guys in for a mother loving treat is what I'm just gonna say right now. This is my friend Brie Sodano. You're about to fall in love. So go ahead and get, I think, the Valentine's ready and everything, because you're going to be sending all the hearts to Bree by the time we're done talking. You guys, yeah, to you.
I'm very excited to get the hearts.
Oh man. Oh, I know they're going to give them to you. So you guys, what we're talking about today, what I always talk about is let's quit our jobs, right? So let's work from home. Let's live life on our terms. Let's do what we want to do in our lives, right? The very beginning of how we accomplish that is by getting our financial ducks in a row. And so some of you might be like, oh my gosh, she said finances. Doesn't she work with Todd? I love Todd. Todd's on investing side. Bree is about to rock your entire world on how to, and here's the thing, this is what our program's called, is find the bleed, okay? So what she helps with, you guys, is, and I'm not gonna like steal thunder, we're gonna go through all of this, but what she helps with is people, whether they're still in their 9-to-5 job, whether they're working paycheck to paycheck, or even if you're a multimillionaire, it crosses all of these things. We lose money left and right without realizing it, okay? And so what she is really focused on and being able to help people do is stop doing that and help them understand why it's happening in the first place and completely change your world so that it no longer happens. And now you start, instead of just losing money left and right, you start stockpiling, and then you're gonna be set up, win, lose, or draw, you're gonna be set up to, I would say, quit your job within the next year. It's not a promise I can make, but I would imagine you would be set up to make a decision like that. So that said, Bree, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to just love on your community and hopefully teach them some cool stuff.
Oh, I love it. Well, so what do you see the most in, let's say, for like people that are working their 9-to-5 jobs and stuff, what do you see the most of what's happening in their world? Like, what are the things that they're not realizing are happening that are actually keeping them, stuck and broke?
So one of the biggest things that happens is most of the time when we try to fix a money problem, we try to do it in a very practical way. So maybe you've heard some advice like, well, dummy, stop getting your nails done, stop buying lattes, like stop going out to eat. And while that may be part of the solution, it's generally really ineffective advice. So the things that we want to look at like making a plan for the human being that is going to have to execute the plan. That's going to be one of the most important things, because you always have to remember, like, money is an inanimate object. It will do whatever you, the human in charge of it, makes it do. And so most money advice is very much based on, all right, we'll do this thing with the money, and then you don't actually follow through with it. That's actually like the bigger challenge. So what I find working with people, and I developed the Find Your Blade after working with hundreds and hundreds of clients over many years. And I found a lot of times we're buying stuff because sometimes we're just like, we forget about it. We forget that subscription is being charged, or we forget, or sometimes we're a domestic goddess at the grocery store. And we're like, I'm gonna make so many organic kale salads, but then on Tuesday you're like, FML, I'm going to chug a glass of wine and order a pizza and wash my kids while we wait for the delivery man to show up. Or sometimes we're exhausted. Being exhausted is one of the most fantastically expensive emotions that there are. If you're exhausted, you're going to be bleeding money left and right, because you're going to be using money to plug your time holes, money to plug, inefficiencies, money to do a lot of things that you don't actually want the money to be doing. But when your back's up against the wall and you're exhausted, that's generally what happens. So those are some of the main things that we see.
Real quick, I want somebody to write that down. Can somebody type that in, please? Using money to plug your time holes. First of all, I just love that. But how real is that? When you're exhausted, you're like, whatever, just whatever. If it costs $50 for me to not have to do this thing. I'm going to pay the $50 to not have to do this thing, whether that's my last $50 or not. I'm freaking exhausted and this thing has to happen. Like it's so ridiculously brilliant to say that. Let me know what you guys, exhaustion is one of the most expensive emotions. Thank you, James, for putting that in there. You guys are like, I mean, give her the hearts right now. Like if you're already, we're seconds. We're seconds into this interview here and already she's like dropping bombs. So if you guys are having questions, please go ahead and put the questions in the comment section so we'd be able to see them. We can put you up on screen and such and get those questions answered for you potentially. But Bree, aside from that, how are you seeing that this is like the root thing? This is the real stuff. Because when we come on here, we just talk about real stuff. I don't care about fluff. And I know that you don't either, which is why I love you so much. We literally, you guys, just so you know, behind the scenes, Bree and I had a chat. And the very first chat that we had, it was like, and I think we're best friends for life. Like I think we're pretty much besties always and forever. But so real talk, with all of these financial issues that people are having, how is that reflecting like in their relationships and in their world, like in their real stuff?
Money, listen, money is a tremendous tool for creation, right? Like when you think about how you use money, you're using it to create the lifestyle that you want and you desire. Yeah. Before you get to that level, there's a lot of work to be done because money causes a tremendous amount of suffering. Sometimes it's the lack of money that causes the suffering. Sometimes it's not being on the same page with our spouse or our lover. Sometimes it's just the feeling of panic and stress that lives inside of our bodies. Like, so the way that our brains, so listen, our brain hardware is like 10,000 years old. We're working with the same brain substance that literally people living in caves are using. And so the way that scarcity shows up to your body is threat of starvation, which your body's like, what? You know, your brain might be like, we're going to have to pay the car payment late, but your body's like, we're going to starve in the woods all alone with no Wi-Fi. And that's why that visceral reaction in your body is so real. When money is managed, it's the most tremendous tool for creation. But when it's not managed well, it just causes a whole lot of suffering, which is like, why I do this? I don't want people to suffer, you know?
Yeah, that's something that we reverse engineer on our side anyway. And I think we talked about this before was we see that a lot of families break up not because of infidelity. Usually infidelity actually isn't the thing. A lot of times people go to therapy for that and they get over infidelity, which is totally crazy to even think about. The thing that they actually separate over are financial problems. They separate over that. And so when we look at, because I'm so forward minded that I love my life and I care about my life, but I really care about my daughter's life and I care about the generations after her. And I'm so forward thinking into that space that I'm thinking we're moving into a place right now that is really, we don't know what we're breeding because families are breaking up left and right. It's kind of the norm. And it's happening mainly because of financial problems. So, and because the families are breaking up, well, now we've got kids that feel insecure. Insecure kids lead to situations that those kids weren't born to lead into. Like it changes them as people, right? And so that's what I say. When I say we don't really know what these next generations, we don't know what we're breeding right now, but we're definitely breeding something. And so what my husband and I, what we talk about is we reverse engineer that into, okay, how can we keep the families together? And you guys that are listening right now know that I feel very strongly about that. And I know that because you guys follow me, you feel very strongly about it as well. This is how we keep families together. It's a big piece, right?
Yeah, money definitely helps. Actually, so if you look at the page for Find and Bleed, what you'll see on the bottom of that is just an extra offer called Plenty, Ditch the Never Enough Money Mentality. And that teaches, it's a very short, like mini workshop. It's about an hour long, and it goes through the ways that scarcity shows up in our behaviors. And here's the deal is when you're in scarcity, your brain does things that makes your body do things that does not make sense. But to you in that moment, you're like, it's maybe it doesn't make sense in the long run, but it's clearly the best choice for right now. But when you are love, when your spouse, when you are roommates, when your best friend, anybody that you love experiences scarcity, oh, we judge them. Because it's not always the same way. So I might experience scarcity in a way that's like, let me hang on to my money and not buy things. Where my spouse may experience scarcity like, let's go stock up. Winter is coming. We must be prepared. We must go to Costco and get all of the tomatoes. And you're like, that's weird.
That's
right? Like people in scarcity, oh, it's a thing. Oh, Martha, it's a thing. People going to Costco buying like 8 years worth of canned goods because scarcity, because really your body's like, we're going to starve to death. So it's like, let's take our resources, go to Costco, buy 8 years worth of canned goods.
Oh my word.
And which like, logically speaking, maybe not the best use of the money that we got, but like your body's like, I'm going to feel so much better if I know that we're at least covered, you know? So,
safe.
Yeah. So I'm saying I'm safe. We're going
Yeah.
to be able to make macaroni all winter. It's going to be fine. All winter. I know. And so what's interesting is that once we figure out the ways that we experience scarcity, and then we can kind of look and see the way our spouses experience scarcity, we can have so much more compassion for where we are and where they are. And we can really approach the entire subject of money with much more compassion and like love and understanding and gentleness, rather than being like, you dumb man, you know, like, not that we would ever say that to ourselves.
Right.
Well, I don't know. Some people probably do, but like, it's a thing. So learning how you behave when you're personally in scarcity, because the other thing is like people talk about getting rid of a scarcity mindset, and you can do work on your mindset where it's not your go-to, but really if your brain is working, you're going to experience scarcity sometimes because it's a very real threat to your body. It's a very real threat, like a bear. You know, like you would never be like, well, I'm never going to be afraid of bears. And you're like, well, if there's a bear near you, you should adjust. The same thing for scarcity.
Yeah.
So it's like, you know, sometimes people think you can like scrub it. If I do enough money mindset work, I'll never experience scarcity. I'm like, unfortunately, I would charge way more if that could be true. It's not.
And that's what was the name of that workshop?
That's called Plenty, Ditch the Never Enough Money Mentality. Because scarcity, a lot of scarcity can be addressed with changing the way our thought patterns work and really learning how to adjust ourselves so that way we can kind of emotionally take care of ourselves when we're in that space instead of going and letting it drive us.
Yeah.
Like sometimes when you're in scarcity, you just need to kind of like sit with yourself while you're in it and be compassionate with yourself so that way you could, you know, be fine and not go to the store and stock up on 50 million things. Because you'd rather have your money in your bank account than in your cabinets.
Yeah. And you guys, that's on the link that's in the description of this video, by the way, on Find the Bleed link. Tell us about Find the Bleed.
Yeah, cool. So Find Your Bleed it's one of the first courses that we do. I think it's some of the best work. When we think about our relationship with money, we want to kind of think about it in terms of levels, right? And so people love to get to the levels of making more money, to love to get to the levels of investing. And that's you know, that's what you teach. You're teaching in those realms. But the thing is if you don't have a good intentional use of money, it doesn't matter how much money you have, you'll make a bigger mess. You know, so Find Your Bleed really helps. One, it teaches a different way to look at money. So we look at our primary resources in life, like our time, our money, and our energy. If you have time, money, and energy, you can turn them into a college degree, into a business, into a drug ring, whatever you want. I know, I was teasing. So time, money, energy, like think about it like primary colors. So a lot of times what we do is we say we're going to save money, but we put a burden on our time or we put a burden on our mental energy. Well, if we're stretched too thin, that won't work. So Find Your Bleed, it helps you to see your 3 primary resources. So then it takes you through the process that I do with my clients, and this stuff works. It's very simple and it works, but it shows you all the places to go through your transactions to look for places that you might have waste. Because when we have waste, we can just cut it. There's no sacrifice. There's no change. You were going to throw it out anyways. Then we want to look for places where inefficient in terms with our time, inefficient in terms with our money and our energy. So I teach some systems on how to like manage household procurement, like, so that way you spend less time, less money, less energy, and you get everything you need. And when we're doing less with all three, then we can like take a bath at the end of the day because we're not so, we're not pulled so very far. And then we start to look at like the deeper levels. I call them low joy purchases. So we start to look at like what are my triggers for emotional spending, the routine that I get and the reward that I get. So if I say, well, self, I'm going to stop buying chicken wings because I go, like, let's just say on my way home from work, I stop at the pub, I go and I have a little snack before I go home. Well, there's probably some emotional need that's getting met. And if I just try to stop buying the snacks, well, then that emotional need isn't being filled. And then it will pop up someplace else. So we want to really look and see, all right, well, what am I getting out of this spending that I actually don't want to do? And is there a better way to do it? So that way you can actually solve the problem and then the solution can stick. Does that make sense?
That is so good. You guys, do you understand how that's, and by the way, this is like $39. Like this is nothing. Like you're spending nothing to be able to fix a problem that it's the best way to fix it. It's the best way to fix it because it's not just putting like a finger in the dam, so to speak, that's just going to have to sit there and keep working at it and working at it. You're changing the actual systems behind what you do. By the way, when you said systems, my heart fluttered a little bit because I'm totally a systems girl and I'm like, yes. Because systems, you guys, systems by nature, anybody can do them. It's the solution and anybody can do them. That's why they're systems. So
yeah. And so for the people who decide to get Find Your Bleed, we offer, like after you go on that page, we offer the Invisible system, which is discounted just like inside this sales funnel, like for your people. Mm-hmm. But the Invisible system is like, I call it a no budget system to manage household finances. And people love it so much because, all right, listen, the idea of budgets is great. Like, I'm not against budgets. I talk about budgets and I kind of like poke fun at them a little bit because they don't work, because they're a plan. The difference between a plan and a system is getting it done. Like, we all make plans that we never do because because the thing about plans is the plans are very in your mind. They're very mental, but we got to get our human body to do the things. So, the Invisible system is also available. It's super discounted today. And basically what we do there is we use the technology that's available to help kind of separate our money by purpose rather than by line item. You go through, you do the math, you figure out like how much your bills cost, how much you need. I call it working capital, but that's like all of the stuff that we see coming, right? Like people are like, I had an emergency. I needed an oil change. And I'm like, is that that caught you off guard? No. Or like, I needed heating oil. And I'm like, yeah, we live in New England. It's not a surprise that winter is coming. We have a lot of winter is coming jokes today. It's winter in New England. And so then we look at our important things. We look at our pocket cash, and people love that because once you have the system set up, you can look at your bank account and know exactly how many more dollars you have to spend this week. And it's just so clean. And it's so systemized. And once it's set up, like, I don't know, well, I'll tell you, like, this is a mushy little story, but a client calls me crying. And I'm like, oh God, what? And she's like, my furnace broke. And I was like, yeah. And she'd been my client for a minute and I knew she was saving money unless she was lying to me. But like, I'd seen her bank statements. So unless she like really went off the rails, Yeah. And I was like, well, okay. Why are you crying? And she's like, I just called the guy and I just wrote the check. He came to fix it and I just wrote the check. And because she was still feeling all that like visceral stress in her body, but having a different experience of it. Yeah. And then we laughed about it later. I mean, she was fine. She was just in such a different spot. And it was because she like knew how much money it needed to go where and when. And I like the Invisible system because once it's set up, there's so much less work to do. You don't have to keep reworking your numbers all the time, wasting your mental energy doing it over and over again. Does anybody do that? Rework your numbers? Like you have a thought and you're like, am I going to be okay? And then we rewrite our budget. Does anybody else do that? I used to do that all the time.
Yeah, I think everybody does that. Everybody does that. I don't care what you
Sometimes it's
say. I don't care
that's
what you guys comment. Everybody does that. I want to talk really quick about that situation that the woman called you and like crying because she wrote the check. There's an experience, you guys, whenever you start to be able to free up this money and feel less beholden to circumstances, that your whole life begins to change, because now you're taking leadership in your own life. You're becoming the person that has control over things, instead of the person that has to like react. Oh my gosh. Instead, like, you've got control, you've prepared for these things. And so when they happen, like the other day, Mike ran over a nail, or I guess he ran over a nail. His tire was flat on the Camaro, which apparently are expensive tires. I don't know. And he's like, well, I have to go get a tire. I have to get a tire. And I'm like, all right, go get a tire. But where, 6 years ago, we would have been like, oh my gosh, well, guess you're not driving that car for a little while. Like, it's just, it's very, very different. But whenever you start to take control of those things, all of a sudden, these things that could completely fire off arguments at home, again, finances being the main basis for relationship failure, it could have fired off stress, anxiety, arguments, everybody sort of just high emotions. Instead, it was like, all right, let me go order a tire, and then it was done. So now your whole life changes. Like, I just want people to understand that, like, this is everything. Like, it's not just taking control of your finances. It is taking control of your finances, but what that means to everything else is truly happiness in your life. Like, it really
Yeah,
is.
it's so much less stressful.
Yeah.
Like if you blow a tire and you don't have money to get a new tire, it is a tragedy. It means you can't get to work. Losing your transportation, it quickly becomes a catastrophe in your life.
Yeah.
And like when you have the money, it's just a minor inconvenience.
Yeah,
It's a minor
exactly.
inconvenience.
I,
That's the difference.
I saw James asked a question. Are you good for a question here?
Yeah.
Awesome. So James, I'm putting you up here. James, question. I feel that my money and wealth has plateaued at a certain level and I can't seem to break through to a higher level. I'm curious what you think are some of the most important values or beliefs you need to have to continue to make and earn more. That's a good question, James.
All right. So that's really an issue of, I call it havingness. If we kind of think about our lives in terms of an emotional temperature, right? They talk about wealth temperature. Sometimes I think it was T. Harv Eker started to talk about it. Sometimes we get to a place where we're comfortable and it's cool. And if you want to keep growing, you're going to have to learn to tolerate. Success is it gets to be hot because you have to really be seen. You have to really, really be seen, right? Like, and so you have to learn to tolerate some of those bigger sensations. So the way that I kind of describe it is when we're praying on something, we're really hoping for something. There's always the good side of the thing that we want and the flip side, right? So like, look, today we're on live. This is my first time, and is it possible that we could end up with a zillion sales and help everybody with their money and change the world and have a great impact? Totally possible. Is it also possible that you guys could decide that you hate me and tell me I have the worst hair ever and write it in the comments and be mean? Yes, it is possible. I don't think that'll happen, but it's possible. So if I wouldn't be able to handle the flip side, then I couldn't then the good side doesn't really matter. So when your wealth is growing and you're plateauing, one of the things that you need to really do is look at where you're unwilling to experience certain feelings. You have to really kind of stretch into that emotional range. So it's really like, I would say the value that you have to really lean into is willingness. Like, I am willing to be seen. I'm willing to be vulnerable. I'm willing to show up at the next level. I'm willing to do those things. And then like the beliefs and values that kind of go with it means that you have to really learn to like lean into compassion for yourself and compassion for where other people are. So like a lot of times the reasons we don't do things is the fear of judgment. We're afraid to be judged. We're afraid to be seen. And like the truth is judgment is always like this thing that we experience from other people, but it's really not about us. It's really kind of about them. And so if you take it and you're like offended and your feelings are hurt and devastated by that, it'll stop your will. So you kind of have to look at it from like, oh, they're suffering and they said that mean thing to me, and because that's where they are. That's what I find. That's what I find. So it's willingness, and then compassion. I think for yourself and others are the two things that help to break those plateaus.
Yeah, that's good. That's really, really good. This is gold. Someone said, what is the plenty offer when purchasing? I know you talked about it a little bit earlier, but do you want to reiterate here just
Sure.
for them since they asked?
So plenty teaches about how scarcity mindset shows up in our behaviors. So we're going to go through, I'm going to explain the way that scarcity kind of works in your brain and your body. And then there's a list of the way that the behaviors that show up in scarcity. And so the thing that you're going to really get out of it is you're going to be like, oh, all right, I do go to Costco when I'm in scarcity, or I don't buy things when I'm in scarcity, or I do this or I don't do this. The reason why this is so important is I kind of think about scarcity like jam hands. Like the more stuff you touch in your life when you're in scarcity, the bigger the mess is to clean up. So if you find that you're in scarcity, you can feel it. You feel that like little panic. What we want to do is be able to just be like, all right, let me just sit with myself for a moment, get my energy cleaned up, get myself like back on track, get my prefrontal cortex back online before I go shopping or before I call the bank or before I do things. So that way
Before I do
there's
things.
less of a mess to clean up. So it helps bring a high level of self-awareness around like your behaviors when it comes to money and all of the things that money impacts.
I love it. And also, I'll never not love your visual of jam hands. So that's just a fantastic visual.
Oh, yeah, I
Dirty
like think about
fingers.
yeah, I think about like well, now my son's 10, but I had this like when he was like littler, he was always sticky. I'm like, I just cleaned you. You were just clean. How are you sticky? And he'd like find like I don't know. That kid was perpetually sticky, and I used to call him Jam Hands
That's so funny. He
for
was
like
just always sticky.
3 years of his life, and I would clean him, and I mean I had wipes everywhere. It was so funny.
Oh man. Well, before we head out, do you want to let people know what to expect through the funnel? And as we say funnel, you go to the page, you grab the first thing, and then you're going to have some offers. Do you want to go through the offers that they'll see in the funnel so they understand as they move through it?
Yes, so we already talked about three of them. So find your bleed is the first one, and so in a level, the first thing that you need to do is understand how money flows out. So that's where find your bleed is. So that's where we're going to work on. We're going to cut out waste. We're going to increase efficiency. We're going to look at really like the emotional triggers for spending. Then plenty is about scarcity mindset. So I'm going to teach you how scarcity, because scarcity is a very physiological response, and it has a very physiological behaviors that go with it. So I'm going to talk to you so that way you can understand yourself in scarcity, and then we go through some of the most common behaviors that we see in scarcity. So that's going to give you a high level of self-awareness to be like, you know what? I'm making a mess of my life. Let me just give myself a minute and slow my roll. The invisible system to stop bleeding money and start stacking cash is the no budget system to manage household finances. So it teaches systems, and it really helps you to use the features in your bank accounts and the technology that's readily available to put some supports in on the habits that you're trying to build, so that way you're not always counting on your willpower to build those habits in your finances. And that's people really love that. I get really great feedback on that. Then the last offer you'll see is called Drop the Debt. And Drop the Debt once and for all teaches how to become the person who is debt free. So there is a financial strategy that's included, but we really go through like the behavior, the mindset, the reasons. We talk about some of that having this level from James's question. So that's really helpful for people who've kind of had the yo-yo debt where it's gone up and we paid it off and then we did it again and then we paid it off again. So that really helps you learn how to have money. Because if you can have money, you can stay out of debt. But if you don't know how to have money, we stay on the hamster wheel. And so that's like the core base of personal finance. So if you can manage those things for your human, then your human can manage the money, and then you're at like, then you're good to stay married and be happy and then get your crap together so you could quit your job.
There it is. Boom. Well, she just
So
tied it up with a little bow at the end. I don't know if you just saw her do that or not, but do you tell me in the comments, do you see why I love Brie? Do you see this? Like, it's clearly obvious, right? The girl knows her stuff, and also she's just like me, no fluff. She's not going to give you a bunch of fluffy garbage. She's going to say, like, here's the deal. This is how you do this thing. It's not like, oh, let's just be ambiguous and blah. Like, she's really just going to tell you how it is and allow you to then go and do the thing that you want to do, right? So thank you, Bree, for spending your morning with me. This has been the coolest.
it was my favorite. I was excited all morning. I was at the gym lifting weights, like, oh, I get to hang out with Martha today. So good.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I look forward to next time. You guys have the best day ever, and thanks again, Bree.
All right.